What's going on, guys? We have some news to look over. We're going to look at Riot news. They announced a convertible note offering, following suit with the other miners doing this, kind of pursuing a MicroStrategy type of strategy, acquiring Bitcoin for convertible notes. We also might have some potential selling from Mt. Gox. We'll talk about that. And we also have an analyst saying that the top is about 12 months from now, maximum. Oh, and also we have a MicroStrategy news announcement. They are acquiring more and more Bitcoin and just acquired more today. Now let's start off with this. This was just a little snippet in this article, but caution over more distributions by Mt. Gox also weighed in after a wallet associated with the exchange moved over 2 billion worth of coins. A move like this usually means a distribution is coming. The positive is Mt. Gox has distributed the vast majority of their coins already, and in my opinion, a lot of this is somewhat priced in. What happened last time we saw selling from Mt. Gox? It brought us all the way down to 49K. Basically, back in August, that was kind of around the end point of their selling, at least the end of the market's reaction to it. There are some other things going on at that time as well, but I don't think that we will see something similar. This is, I think, around a fifth of what they had originally, something like that. And I do think that this is pretty much baked into the price for the most part. But of course, when you dump 2 billions of coins into the market, it might drop the price a bit. That might be a good opportunity for us in 2025, a last chance to buy some Bitcoin. I'm definitely not planning on buying much of the Bitcoin plays in 2025. The closer we get to the end of the cycle, the riskier it gets. And I wouldn't even say high risk, high reward. I'd say higher risk, lower reward as we get closer to the end of the cycle. Now, when will the end of the cycle be? According to this article and this analyst, it's going to be sometime in late 2025. One analyst sees Bitcoin topping out in late 2025. If you follow the cycle, that makes perfect sense, but there's also something else to this. And this is what's called the NUPL metric, or net unrealized profit or loss metric. According to this metric, Bitcoin has entered the euphoria stage. This could extend Bitcoin's rally until the end of 2025. According to Quentin Francois, co-founder of WeRate, Bitcoin is entering the euphoria stage. You have a maximum of 12 months before the cycle top. You can basically see on the chart, we get to this green zone. The blue zone is basically the topping. This is where Bitcoin tops out. It did this in 2021. It did this again in 2017. Again in 2013. This is a pretty good indicator of when to really consider taking some profits. You should probably be taking profits a little bit before this point, but I digress. But what else? Well, as said by a crypto analyst at Real Vision, James Coutts, Bitcoin has hit new all-time highs in the face of a deteriorating liquidity backdrop. If conditions worsen, the rally, while euphoric, can only last for a limited time. If conditions ease from here, then a pullback is warranted. Then off we go again. M2, global M2, appears to be bottoming. This is a function of the pullback of the dollar. And according to Raul Paul of Real Vision, Bitcoin set for a local top above 110,000 by January of 2025, based on this correlation with the liquidity index. But as he has also mentioned, global M2 is going to keep expanding until early 2026. When global M2 grows, you usually see Bitcoin grow as well. It's a funny coincidence that the cycle and global M2 are so correlated. It's insane, actually. And we also had some MicroStrategy news. They are working their way slowly but surely, quickly but surely, to 500,000 Bitcoin, almost 500,000 Bitcoin. They're at 423,650 Bitcoin now, and today they did acquire another 21,550 Bitcoin for $2.1 billion. And some of the Bitcoin miners have followed suit. One example is Mara. Mara is going to use proceeds from a $700 million private offering and a 0% convertible senior notes due in 2031, so after the next cycle. And companies announcing this, I think it is a smart idea. I would expect Bitcoin to be much higher in price by next cycle, even by obviously the end of next cycle. And I think this is a great way for these companies to go to acquire as much Bitcoin as possible. And we did have news today of Riot announcing the same. Riot announced a $500 million private offering of convertible senior notes. These expire in 2030, but they can redeem these a little earlier. They can redeem them in 2028, which is basically the next halving. We should see an anticipatory run-up before that point. And right now, Riot is getting a negative reaction to this. We have seen this before, I believe. When these announcements get made, there is a quick initial negative reaction. I do think Riot will turn around. There will be a positive later reaction to this, but on a day where Bitcoin isn't doing that great, a company announcing this might not be seen as a big positive. Now, one thing I wanted to show you guys that is very, very interesting, I think it's a very eye-opening thing. I might have shown you guys this before, but look at last cycle. So we didn't rally until we broke our previous high, or till we broke this like descending resistance, but you could also say it's just a break of this level, that previous, not all-time high, but cycle top. This was the last cycle. the top that it saw so far in that cycle, right? So back in 2019, which is 1 year before the halving, right? We topped out, pulled back, tried again, and then broke out. What did we see this cycle? Very, very similar, almost around the same time. This was in July of 2023. So this one was back in April of 2019, 1 year before the halving. This was July of 2023, about a year before the halving. Did the same thing, topped out, been pulling back. It's been facing this descending resistance, similar to last cycle. I do think once we break this descending resistance, but also the $20 psychological level, that is when Riot goes parabolic, in my opinion. Now, do you want to wait until 20 and swing trade it out? Or do you want to wait till the break of this descending resistance? My gut would tell me the descending resistance. If you look at the descending resistance back there, we saw no pullbacks at all the way up to that, psychological level, that previous peak there. So you didn't see any cooldowns after the break of this descending resistance. If it's anything like last cycle, we'll see a big reaction on a break of descending resistance, and it will keep running on the break of that psychological 20, that cycle top that we've seen so far. One thing I also want to show you guys with Riot is, because of how it's been doing as of recently, we are seeing a golden cross. This is nice, and this could be another indicator of good things to come. One thing we are facing that you should be aware of is we do have a gap down here in the roughly $10 area. And following this pattern, we could fill it out and pull back one more time down to $10, fill this gap up, and then cleared for takeoff. One thing to also realize though is sometimes these Bitcoin miners won't fill their gaps until the next cycle bottom. Here's one right here, here's one right here. We didn't fill these out until the bear market of the end of the cycle, until party over. We might do the same. So in my opinion, don't hold tight for a gap fill that might never come. I think DCA is the way with Riot right now, and many of the Bitcoin miners and many of the Bitcoin proxies. I think there is still time to scale in. The Bitcoin miners aren't going euphoric. The Bitcoin miners are not doing that great. Retail is very disappointed with the Bitcoin miners, despite most of them still outperforming Bitcoin to this day from the bear market lows. Riot, however, is one that is not outperforming Bitcoin. Riot is underperforming Bitcoin, and by a considerable margin. Riot is only up a little over 3x from its bottom. Bitcoin is up closer to 5x. In my opinion, when the Bitcoin miners top out, many of them will have outperformed Bitcoin to that point. And when you look at what Riot was doing earlier in the cycle, Riot at one point was a 5x. I think Riot by peak, from bottom to top, will do more than a 10x. I think that is bare minimum in my opinion. A 10x from Riot from bear market lows would put it into the 30s. I personally think that's pretty reasonable. When you look at last cycle, when we broke this pattern, first off, it wasn't just the break of $3, but also, this previous top here, this $5 area. Once we broke that, Riot ran all the way to almost $80. Now, I don't expect it to do necessarily what it did last cycle. I think there's a chance that we don't break previous cycle tops, not just for Riot, but for many of the Bitcoin miners. When you think about what was going on back then, when you think about the massive amount of money printing, when you think about retail investors being at home with nothing to do, I personally don't think we will see something this insane. But can we see Riot go into the 30s and do a 10x from the bottom? Like I said, certainly. I think that is more than doable. And when you think about where we were last cycle, Riot was, $3-4 at this point last cycle, and it ran to $80. Riot was a fourth of that price, and it still ran to $80. But like I said, there's a lot more money printing back then. Things were definitely crazy. Long story short, I think a break of this descending resistance, a break of this psychological 20 will bring us into the 30s in short time, similar to last cycle. This is the parabolic stage for the Bitcoin miners. And you might be asking, well, why didn't you just wait to buy now? Why did you waste all your time on the Bitcoin miners over the last couple years? Well, if you wait until Riot breaks out of its descending resistance, you're going to get maybe, a double, triple, maybe. If you were accumulating while this was low, you're getting much closer to that 10x I mentioned. You're not getting a 10x if you just DCA'd throughout the way. You're obviously not getting it at that very bear market low price point, but you're getting a good average, probably around this, under $10 area. Well under $10. So the goal with the Bitcoin miners is you buy them while they're low. You get more multiples if you buy these assets while they're low. Now, of course, there's something to be said about not buying a falling knife, thinking something's at its lows and it just keeps going lower and lower. Usually you want to see indicators that things are turning around. Here's a great example, this golden cross, the first one we saw in the beginning of the cycle. We didn't see one during that whole bear market. That was something to avoid. This whole time, the price was basically stuck under the 200 MA. Once it got over the 200 MA, that is literally where things shifted. But anyways, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked. How are you guys feeling about Riot? Definitely a rough day for Riot holders. A good day to buy some calls in my opinion. How are you guys feeling about Bitcoin? Are we going to close this year over 100K or under 100K? What do you guys think? Are we due for a major correction for Bitcoin? Also, what do you think about this MicroStrategy news? Do you think MicroStrategy can reach 500,000 Bitcoin by year end? I think it's going to be close. But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.